Hi, Jim Roddy here from the RSPA with a quick word before we start today's pod. Registration is now open for Retail Now 2022, the Retail Technology Channel's #1 trade show, education conference, and networking event. Join RSPA and Retail IT channel leaders live and in person July 24th through 26th at the Gaylord Palms Resort and Convention Center in Orlando. Retail Now will have everything you've come to expect from the RSPA, plus several new features including Niche and Startup Alley in the Expo Hall, the first ever ISV community networking reception, 6 education tracks, executive education, security and legal, next gen technology, sales and customer service, and cannabis, plus a new software developer ISV education track. Thanks to a strong Retail Now in 2021, this year's event is expecting to draw close to 2,000 attendees and 180 show floor exhibitors, which could make this the best Retail Now ever. If you're serious about the Retail IT channel, you have to attend Retail Now 2022. It's where the industry meets. For all the details and to register at discounted early bird rates, visit the Retail Now website today at gorspa.org/Retail Now. Hope to see you there, and I hope you enjoy this episode with my good friend, Mark Fraker of BlueStar. Welcome to another episode of the Trusted Advisor podcast and video series powered by the Retail Solutions Providers Association. Our goal on the pod is to accelerate the success of today's and tomorrow's leaders in the retail IT industry. I'm Jim Roddy, back with you again. Thank you so much for joining us. In this episode, we'll focus on VAR opportunities with electric vehicle charging stations. We'll examine how traditional retail IT resellers can take advantage of this emerging technology. And our special guest to shed light on this topic is Mark Fraker, the Chief Technology Officer for RSPA distributor member BlueStar. Mark has been a leader in the retail IT channel for several years, including roles with the RSPA as chair of the marketing committee, the vendor working group, the endowment committee, a board member, and an RSPA board chairperson. And if you've ever been to one of BlueStar's partner conferences called VARTech, you know the BlueStar team not only knows how to put on a great show, they also do a really good job of helping VARs and ISVs see around corners. Mark, always great to talk with you. Thanks for being here today.
Jim, thanks for having me. Much appreciated.
Always great to talk with you. Did you catch my dad joke? We're talking about electric vehicle charging stations. I said our guest to shed light on this topic.
Yes, I did.
I'm bringing my A game for you. That's really what I'm working on. Or you might be thinking otherwise at this point. So, all right, somebody new to the podcast is like, what is this? Corny jokes from the host? Like, let's get down to business. So let's get down to business then. And so why don't we talk about the VAR opportunities with those electric vehicle charging stations and do it kind of step by step. And so when you say electric vehicle charging station, what should our listeners and viewers picture?
So I think there's a couple of things, Jim. First of all, we got to talk about the consumption model of technology just real quick. And it's changing very, very quickly, as you know. What we're seeing in these subscription-based models is that it's not always based on time, where you use something another month, you pay for a month. You know, sometimes it's the number of information that you download. It could be the number of miles that something was delivered, or it could even be the number of kilowatts that are transferred from an AC or DC charger into an electric vehicle. So that's what we're going to talk about today. And the ultimate solution is, how do you get that electrical from an AC or DC into that vehicle and the solution around it? So first of all, it's really a platform sale, and I think we need to understand all the moving parts. So first you have the hardware, and the hardware would be things such as the post or the kiosk that is housing an inverter that converts AC power to DC power. It will have payment processing hardware in it. It could also have appliances for the internet and so on, antennas. And then I think you have to go and say, okay, what are the softwares that are involved in the platform? So when you're talking softwares, I mean, you have a multitude of softwares. One is running all of the application for taking credit cards, and the platform that is giving all the information to the drivers about how much kilowatts they're putting through, where they've been, and so on and so on. A lot of AI into that platform. The other one is called PEDO, and we'll talk about this in a little bit, but PEDO is important in electric vehicle charging stations. It stands for Programmatic Digital Advertising out of the home. And I'll get to that in detail in a second. But there's a whole software program that's managing the media and the content on these 55-inch digital screens that are attached to some of the chargers. And then you have services. And services are quite involved with a charging station. First of all, the person who does the install is going to be a certified electrical contractor. They're going to have the ability to go pull permits. They will work with all of the municipalities and local governments and such. They're certified, and they will be the ones that will produce actually the estimate on what this would cost, because they're probably going to tear up your parking lot, blacktop, cement, your landscaping, and then they have to make it just like new, but when they leave. So all of those are going on. And then after it's installed, you have support issues, and you're going to have people that will be providing warranty and support in the maintenance as ongoing. So there's a lot of moving parts in this. And then finally, something that most of your resellers are familiar with, there's a payment application or software that's running in there as well. And there's a revenue stream to make money when you're charging, selling kilowatts. So that's sort of the whole solution together, a lot of moving parts. And I know throughout this podcast, we're going to break those down and talk to them about it.
Yeah, thank you. I'm going to ask you a little bit later in terms of, like, you don't have to be an electrical contractor to do this, right? The VAR can act as kind of the general contractor. But can you talk about, is there also an element because of that media, the PEDO that you had called it in terms of the programmatic advertising, is that also an opportunity that could be uncoupled from the charging station, and that's something that could be resold and implemented as well? Can you talk about that as an opportunity of kind of an offshoot of these charging stations?
Sure. So you got to think of the revenue stream that's coming from PEDO is a reoccurring revenue. And think of it like a stock market. So in a stock market, you have stockbrokers that are saying, we have these stocks for sale. And then you have other people are saying, I would like to buy stocks that are in technology, or I'd like to buy stocks that are in retail companies and so on. We'll replace stock with ad. And you have all these ad brokers that are working in not a stock exchange, but an ad exchange, and they're buying and selling ads. And what they're doing is they're taking certain ads and putting them on endpoints. Those endpoints are those 55-inch screens that I was talking about. Those screens could be on an electric vehicle charging station. It could be hanging in the front window of a restaurant or a retailer. It could be bolted on the side of the wall of the store, or it could be inside on a kiosk or outside on a kiosk. But when people who want to advertise their products put out bids for their ads, it generates a revenue that we share with not only just the reseller, but also with the end user who has the screens in their facility. So it's very, very lucrative. And there's a lot of money to be made in that digital advertising format. It's becoming more and more popular, and it's really just catching on fire just the last year or so.
Yeah, thank you for that. So talk about, I wanted to frame up the technology first so people knew, like, what exactly are we talking about. But oftentimes with new technology, right, especially ISVs come out with a software and they're like, oh, let me tell you about this software. And then the VARs are like, okay, can I make money off this thing? And is it going to be recurring revenue? And oftentimes it's like, well, we haven't really thought about that. Or I still remember, I won't name the vendor, they came out with a product 7 years ago and the VARs did the entire math on it. And they're like, I'm going to bust my butt for $6 a month for the total installation, everything that I do with this. You mentioned lucrative. Can you talk about how lucrative and really the recurring revenue opportunity and the related margins with these electric vehicle charging stations?
Sure. So let's just take the reoccurring revenue without the hardware, without the selling of the kilowatts. Let's just take the PEDO, okay? Just the programmatic advertising and look at that first. So most of your listeners are very familiar with reoccurring revenue when you're talking about credit cards, right? So they all get part of that reoccurring revenue from processing credit cards with their end users. Here's how lucrative Pedo is with advertising. Just 2 screens that would be outside a restaurant. And let's say those 2 screens could be on charging stations. It could be both in the front window of that restaurant, okay? Those 2 screens on a monthly basis will generate more reoccurring revenue for the reseller than processing all of the credit cards for that entire month in that restaurant. And the other thing up and beyond that is it also produces revenue for the restaurateur themselves to pay for the solution. And remember, the restaurant doesn't have to be open to be generating revenue from these screens because it's based on the number of impressions per minute. And that includes everybody walking by, driving by, and so on. So it's, you know, eyeballs on the screens. And just because your restaurant's not open on Sundays, there's still people driving by and walking by your restaurant. So you're generating revenue when you're closed.
Got it. And I think one thing is our listeners, you know, they're familiar with, like you said, credit card processing, but not the advertising world. Like you and I have been in marketing, and we know how expensive advertising can be. I mean, people know about the, you know, $3 or $4 million Super Bowl ad, but you know, people are spending thousands of dollars to really target a specific zip code or folks who are shopping in a certain area or things like that. Is there any more color you can add to that for somebody who might not be familiar with it and think, really, there's money in advertising? Can you talk a little bit more about that, Mark?
Yeah, so there's 5 types of ads throughout programmatic. Programmatic means that when I was talking about the stock exchange or the ad broker exchange, that happens automatically. There's hardly any human intervention whatsoever. And these ads through algorithms are being bought and sold and sent to endpoints or screens to be displayed. Now, it can be determined which ads go where, because if you were, let's say, a Coca-Cola restaurant, and you sold Coca-Cola, you would not want to put a Pepsi ad in front of your restaurant or your competitor, whatnot, right? So you have people, large companies that are saying, these are the types of markets that we're looking for in the demographics, and they're out selling that to those endpoints. You have other people who are putting out RFPs. And when they put out RFPs, people who have endpoints can contact them and say, we have this for sale on these endpoints. And then you have the ability to, let's say there's going to be a Final Four basketball game in town. An advertiser might come in and say, just during March Madness, we're going to run this ad in this region for this long, and then we're out. And then finally, you have what's called hyper-local ads, where you have someone who wants to run an ad, let's say Mark's Bar and Grill down the street. I want to run it at the mall where there have car charging stations. So all of those different types of ads are controlled by our partner, Smartify in this particular case. Have 400 of these ad brokers working on this. If a reseller tried to do this themselves, I think they'd go bonkers.
Yes.
Right? But the nice thing is the CPM, that is what ads are sold by, is
And CPM stands for cost per thousand, correct?
per 1,000 views or impressions, right?
Yep.
So every year for the last few years, that cost has been going up over 20%. So if you looked at credit cards in a restaurant and you did $1 million in credit cards, you made this amount of money. Second year, you do $1 million, you make the exact same amount. Third year, $1 million, exact same amount. Well, in programmatic advertising, your first year, you make this amount doing $1 million. But the next year, if you did $1 million in a restaurant, it doesn't matter. The cost of those ads went up, you'll make an additional 20% margin on those ads because the cost went up. So think about that. In 5 years, you would compound it, right?
Mm-hmm.
You double.
Yeah.
So great opportunity right now.
Yeah, it kind of reminds me. So Tom Reichert, who's a friend of both of ours and RSPA Hall of Famer, was with Mercury Payment in the really early days when payment processing was not ubiquitous like it is now. And he would talk to VARs about this is something you need to add, and they'd be like, it doesn't seem like it's right for me. And he talked about people would come back to him 2, 3, 4 years later and say, I should have listened to you. Like, why didn't I look into it? So I'm glad you're bringing this opportunity again. Reminds me of kind of those early days of payments where it was a strange new thing to your point of sale dealer. So, well, can we talk about selling this? So I think you touched on this a little bit, like whose doors do the VARs knock on to sell this technology? And this is such an emerging technology, and I drive a gas powered truck that I don't even know where charging stations are or should be or will be. I only see them if my family's shopping at a Whole Foods or there's a Sheetz convenience store that's near us, and you're like, oh, look at that, there we go, there's a charging station with a screen on it. Can you talk about, if VARs are interested, just say they go all the way forward and they say, I want to sell this, who are they going to be selling it to?
So first, I think we have to understand what types of chargers are there, okay? So there is a level 1 charger, which is probably what you're gonna find in most people's homes and their garages. It's gonna run on 110, maybe 220. It's gonna take 6, 8, hours to charge your car. Then there's a level 2 that's running 220 volts into it. This is what you're going to see in front of most commercial businesses. Those are both AC powered. And then there's a level 3, which is DC powered. And DC powered is very fast, very powerful. Now, level 2 is where people would go and want to charge for like 30 minutes to a few hours to maybe overnight or something. But those level 3s, they'll take a Tesla from 0 to full in less than 40 minutes. Okay, so very hot, very extreme type of charging. So if you think about this, the big market right now is in the level 2, and that's what we're promoting the most of. In fact, the level 2 chargers, that's where we have on some of them that 55-inch screen. So in retail, think of it outside shopping centers, supermarkets, big box stores, SMB, commercial, could be parking lots, hotels, resorts, institutional, libraries, hospitals, education, airports, train stations, industrial, manufacturing facilities, warehouses, truck terminals. People are still going to start charging their fleets as they move to an electrical vehicle fleet. And we also sell a level 2 for fleet charging as well. Then you have municipalities, obviously, all government buildings in the parking lots. You could even put in, religious institutions in there. And then the other really big market, Jim, would be multi-tenant or multi-family dwellings. So some of these really large condo complexes that are 20,
Sure.
30 stories tall, right? And the parking garages underneath. So that's where you're going to find the chargers are going to be. Yes, the oil companies are going to go out and try and install, along the highway, some D3 chargers into their gas station complex. But, not everybody's going to want to sit in their car for 30 minutes or an hour when it's hot outside. They're probably going to want to go in someplace to, a lounge or whatever. And gas stations just don't have the room. There's so much money they need to make on every square foot on a shelf, right?
Yeah, it's never good advice to spend a lot of time hanging out at a gas station, right? That's just not something that people should do.
That's right. So there's a lot of infrastructure change that'll have to happen with some of the bigger companies that will get involved in this. But your readers, or excuse me, your listeners all have the ability to walk in and sell something to an existing customer, because almost every one of them is going to be involved with electric vehicle charging in the very near future.
Interesting. Yeah, so two things. One is like a personal thing. So I think I've shared with you, I don't know if I've shared with our listeners yet, but I'm in Erie, Pennsylvania. I'm going to be, my family's going to be moving to the Raleigh area. Raleigh, North Carolina, and we're going to move into an apartment that's one of those, maybe not as tall as what you talked about, but it's got, a whole bunch of floors on it, and we have a parking ramp that we're going to be in, and that makes me go, oh yeah, if you have an electric vehicle, that is a perfect place for it. But I'm also thinking, so to our listeners and viewers, they're going to say, well, I don't deal with any landlords, but they deal with, hotels and, like you said, the malls and the restaurants and retailers, things of that nature. And I feel bad. I'm asking you, like, well, how would BlueStar help? And I hope people don't think it's a commercial, but like, if I'm a reseller, I'm thinking, well, how am I going to sell this on my own? Do you go in and have somebody, is there a partner who sells with them? Is there training? I'm curious, because this isn't like just selling, cellular failover, right? Not that that's easy to sell, but it's a lot less complex than what this is all about. Can you talk about, again, so once somebody goes beyond, are they knocking on the door with somebody? How do they know how to present this to someone?
So one thing that we're doing is that we're working with the resellers, and we have a training program that we're putting some of them through right now. And this training program teaches them how to go in and sell the ROI to the landlords and to the merchants. So if you had a cinema, for example, the cinema might not own the parking lot, right? So you're going to be dealing with their landlord for electric vehicle charging stations. But when there is a revenue stream that's available to them for that parking lot now, landlords love that, number one. Number two, you're going to be able to put pedo screens inside the front of the theater and generate money for the theater themselves. So there's a lot of revenue involved in this for everybody. But what we do is we put them through a series of training classes, and then we have a group of experts in electric vehicle charging stations that have been involved in installs of thousands of these, that will work side by side with the resellers and help them close the deals. When it comes, to doing the installation, with Loop, who is our partner along with Fabcon on the actual hardware and such, we have a group of electrical contractors across Canada and the US, coast to coast and border to border, that will do the installs. This is what they do for a living. So as soon as we have a reseller says, I have someone that's interested, they put them through this portal, the questions, a quote, then the electrical contractor goes out, does the site survey, finds out what the cost is for the permits and such. Now there's a final cost to do the install. The hardware we already know, the services and the software is known. And then, in our particular case, we have our BlueStar hybrid SaaS financial services, which will finance all of these deals, for 5-7 years. The payback, though, for the owners of these electric vehicle charging stations is phenomenal.
Interesting. Thank you for that. I'm going to dive in a little bit deeper in terms of what's the ideal VAR and their skill and experience. But first, we're going to pause here to let our listeners and viewers know that an RSPA membership has never been more valuable or affordable. Annual sponsorships for VARs start at just $250 a year for dozens of high-value services. Also, vendors and software developers benefit from an RSPA membership through introductions to VAR and ISV members and by showcasing their solutions through the exclusive RSPA Solution Center. Accelerate your success by joining the RSPA today. Also, we want to thank our sponsors who support the RSPA community and make this podcast and video series possible. Our gold sponsors are Brother, CoCard, Heartland, Plastic Printers, ScanSource, and Shift4. And Mark, you will never guess who our platinum sponsor is. It is BlueStar. Thank you for your support. We appreciate it. To receive the benefits of an RSPA membership or RSPA sponsorship, email membership@gorspa.org. That's membership@gorspa.org. Finally, registration is open for Retail Now 2022, the Retail IT Channel's #1 trade show, education conference, and networking event. This year's event is set for July 24th through 26th at the Gaylord Palms in Orlando. Retail Now is where the industry meets. And I know you and I will be meeting there as well, along with hopefully about 2,000 of our friends. Looking forward to getting back to Florida for that event. So you touched on a little bit earlier that VARs don't need to be experts in advertising or electrical contracting or things like that. But what skills or experience do they need in order to resell this? Like, is there a, I don't want to say ideal, but a range of a profile of what would be a good kind of reseller who could really make this happen and kind of act as general contractor for all these things?
That's a great question. I think it's the best question in the whole podcast thus far. And I'll answer it this way. We tried to make this into a turnkey solution, part of our in a box series. And the reason for that was there's a lot of moving parts. It's very complicated. Okay. What we're trying to have the resellers do is not go take a new product and sell it to a new market. That can be very difficult
Oh,
and
yeah.
time consuming, right? You want to stay focused on what you do best. That's why we're bringing in sales resources and everything else to help the resellers close the business. What we're looking for is some resellers that want to take a very profitable solution into their existing customer base that they know. They can call that customer up, and the first question isn't going to be, hey, can I talk to you about this? It's going to say, hey, how's the niece and the kids doing, right? That's the type of relationship that they have with their customers. So when you say what type, of, values should the reseller have, a great relationship with their current customer base. And you heard when I was saying where these are going to go, they're going to be everywhere. And since they're going to be everywhere, it's going to become part of everybody's lives. And some of the stats, when you look at them, by 2030, 40% of the cars manufactured globally are going to be electric of some form. Well, you have to have the infrastructure to support that. So it will be part of everybody's lives. And because of that, the electrical engineers, we've taken care of that issue. All of the grants, all of the different subsidies, all of the different tax breaks and such that are part of putting or installing an electrical grid anywhere around the world is different, even by county or by state. We have a group that will help figure that all out. So when you go back and talk to your customer, you will have a complete cash flow and ROI, including all of the government subsidies, to show them what the payback time is. When you look at once it's installed, you're going to get a check every quarter for the reoccurring revenue that's generated, your portion of it. If there's a problem with anything on that, these are being monitored 24/7, not by just the hardware manufacturers, because these are remote managed devices, but you have Smartify, who is managing all of the screens. And they're going to make sure that those screens are up and producing revenue, right? It affects their pocketbook just as much. And then you have BlueStar, who is your direct contact with all of this and the group of vendors that we've put together. So we've tried to take care of making this turnkey from, I have someone who's interested, we'll walk you through the process. Here are the 5 steps. We get to a sale. Electrical contractors do the install. All of the logistics and everything are handled by BlueStar, and then the ongoing support kicks in. The reason for that is we want the resellers to be able to focus on what they do every day. You hit the nail on the head when you said Tom Reichert used to say to them, just do what you always have been doing, just add credit cards to it. It'll happen automatically. Resellers didn't have to change their world around to offer credit cards. It just laid on top of what they were already doing. That's exactly what this is.
Got it. I guess let's keep that parallel going, because what happens sometimes is when the credit card machine goes down or the network isn't working or something like that, the VAR is the first person who the merchant's going to call, because that's who they have the connection with. Can you talk about these in terms of like what happens when one of these isn't working or somebody backs into one, right? And there's some sort of an accident there. is that merchant going to call the VAR? Is there going to be some auto alert that lets these other, the folks who they've kind of contracted it to, or if the VAR does get the call, do they just go and refer it? Can you talk about that real world application of it?
Well, I can tell you that our network will understand that there's a problem before the reseller will know, and before actually the landlord or the end user will know.
Okay.
Because as soon as that goes offline, a notification comes out instantly in real time, and they know there's a down screen. If the charger will not open up to put through the charge into the car, that's all driven by card not present or card present with an app. So you're going to go in and scan a QR code, pull up the app, and then you can see what's going on in the app. All of this is being monitored. So as soon as something goes wrong, then the process starts to repair it remotely. And if it can't, then a truck rolls to replace it. Now, if someone walks by with a lead pipe and breaks the screen or something like that, yes, we're going to know that that happened, and then a truck will roll to make the repairs on that.
This kind of reminds me, I keep drawing parallels with what VARs are doing now. And I remember when we had a panel at Retail Now talking about cellular failover, where the VAR outsourced it to a service, and he would get an alert on his Apple phone. It'd be like, Mary's bar, just had internet go down, and then he'd wait 2 seconds. Now cellular failover is kicked in and it's working. And he's like, great, like this is the way to make a living. And it's, I don't want to say this is like a referral model, but is that kind of how this is structured in terms of the VAR has the introduction, they make the initial sale, but they don't have to do the ongoing service, turning the screwdriver, putting out fires. Am I understanding that the right way?
You're absolutely right. The best way to look at it is it's the same way that they've been treated using credit cards, right?
Got it. Great, thank you. And so you touched on a little bit, so thank you for that. I wanted to get really specific in terms of what this means for VARs, but somebody can say, like I said, I don't have an electric vehicle. I don't know if I would buy one in my next vehicle, and I don't even know how much of those are around the corner, what the availability is. You hear about Tesla, but can you talk about some of the general trends? You touched on those a little bit. Can you share that a little bit more to talk to the listeners and the viewers to say like what it is in 2022, how much the opportunity is, how much bigger is it going to be 5 years, 10 years from now?
Yeah, so here's a few factoids, okay? So 1 out of 5 new cars sold will be electric in 2025. And there'll be 120 million electric vehicles on the road by 2030.
Is that North America, worldwide?
That's North America.
Okay, all right.
So then you have EV charging infrastructure by 2030, $300 million, okay?
Wow.
And then new EV chargers to be installed by 2030, 20 million, okay? So when you start to look at this and where the demand is, so going up to 2030, level 1 is 11% of the demand, level 1 chargers. Level 2 is 68%, and level 3 is 21%. Now, I think we'll see that change a little bit between level 2 and level 3. Battery technology is changing rapidly. And so that's a good thing because the cars are going to be able to go farther on the charge. And then the other thing to look at is that in 2030, it's estimated sales of the same vehicles. So you're talking about electric and hybrid vehicles will be 4.7 million. And last year it was 526,000. And of those 526,000, full electric, not hybrids, but full electric cars only made up 3.4%. But in 2030, that 4.7 million, 30% or more will be all electric vehicles, not hybrids. So opportunity, what's it at? Well, the CAGR, worldwide for EV charging stations is expected to grow by 46.6%. So, I'll put it this way. This train hasn't left the station yet, but it is really close to leaving, and it is a very, very fast train. The last thing you want to be doing is running down the track trying to catch this train, because you won't.
Yeah, get on while it's sitting still and it's about to move. And it's interesting. People complain so much about the gas prices now, but the people who own electric vehicles, right? They don't have to worry about those. We don't have to worry about them. And quite frankly, all the world events and all the different things that go into this. And so it seems like there's a there was almost a push in terms of it's better for the planet and for the environment, and have an electric vehicle, and it was being shoved on people. But now it seems like there's a lot of gravity that's moving in the direction of electric vehicles in terms of just adoption and availability. Again, people would love to get away from stopping at the pump and paying whatever it is in your town per
Well,
gallon. Am I understanding that as well?
you are, and there's a reverse side to that too. But you look at the auto companies, and they're the ones that are fueling this. They're forming whole new divisions. I mean, Ford just announced today or yesterday that they're forming a whole new division, one for gas and diesel, and one for electric, right, or alternative fuels. And then you need to look at just what's happening, with electric vehicles right now. There was a video that someone sent to me yesterday, and I'll have to send it to you after this podcast. But it is a person sitting in a Chevy Tahoe, excuse me, gas powered, right? They're looking at a line of Teslas waiting to go into DC3 chargers. There were 8 DC3 chargers, and there were over 20 Teslas waiting in line to charge.
Mm-hmm.
And this was not California. This was Louisiana.
Wow.
So, and what the person says in the video, I'll stick with my Tahoe. Right. But you're going
Right.
to see it all evolve and change. It is. And it's going to be mandated, and there's going to be more incentives that come out by the different governments around the world. I mean,
Yep.
This isn't just a North America, solution or issue. This is a global solution and issue.
Got it. So we've framed up the opportunity. We framed up how VARs can make money on this. When can we actually, like, we've almost talked about it from a theoretical and then how would it be applied standpoint. When do you think we can expect to see VARs implementing this technology and selling it and making money on it?
Well, we are already training some resellers as we speak. I plan on attending 2 shows, one at the end of this month and one at the end of April, where we're going to showcase this technology and this solution in the resellers booths. So to answer your question, we're doing it right now.
Right.
I expect some of them to sell their first units within the next 30 days.
Wow, great. All right. The future is now. So my final question for you is, so with the VARs who are listening to this, what should they do next? Where do they take advantage of the whole EV charging station trend? What are first few steps they should take?
Well, one, I would say do as much research as you can. I mean, look in your local area to where you're at. What are any of the local jurisdictions and such? You're going to find out that in some areas, if someone touches their parking lot, they're going to be required to put in 17% electric vehicle charging stations in that entire lot, and so on. That's why this is going to continue to grow. There's just won't be enough charging spots for the amount of electric vehicles that'll be out there. But if you are seriously interested and you want to make a commitment to selling this product and you want to find out more information, when it comes to BlueStar, you can just send me an email and I will get with you and we'll set up a 1-hour qualifying meeting with our partners to explain more about it. And my email address is very simple. It's mfraker, Fraker, at bluestarinc.com.
Fabulous. And if folks are driving around and they weren't able to write that down, you just reach out to your member services manager at the RSPA. You'll either know them directly or you can just email membership@gorspa.org, and we will connect you with Mark. So, well, very interesting opportunity, and that does it for this episode of The Trusted Advisor. We hope you enjoyed our discussion. If you did, be sure to subscribe to the RSPA YouTube channel and the Trusted Advisor podcast so you never miss an episode. We'd also appreciate it if you'd rate us wherever you find your favorite podcasts. My personal philosophy is the more stars, the better. And if you'd like to learn more best practices for VARs and ISVs in the retail technology industry, check out the RSPA blog. You can find it at gorspa.org and then clicking on RSPA blog. Before we go, big thanks again to Mark Fraker for sharing his wisdom with us today. Thanks also to RSPA Director of Marketing and Strategic Partnerships, Chris Arnold, for his production work, Joseph McDade for our music, and last but not least, thanks so much to you for listening. Our goal at the RSPA is to accelerate the success of our members in the retail IT ecosystem by providing knowledge and connections. For more information, visit our website at gorspa.org. Thanks for listening, and goodbye, everybody.